The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its taste, with what can it be seasoned? It is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hilltop cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a bushel basket. It is set on a lampstand where it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, your light must shine before all, so that seeing your good works, they may give praise to your Father in heaven." The Gospel of the Lord. What a beautiful selection of readings today as we reflect on being church and being the community of Jesus. And especially that first reading, did you notice? From the prophet Isaiah. What a beautiful reading. Share your bread with the hungry, shelter the oppressed and the homeless, clothe the naked when you see them, and do not turn your back on your own. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your wound shall quickly be healed. Wow. Your vindication shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. And then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and the Lord will say, "Here I am." If you remove from your midst oppression, false accusation, malicious speech, if you bestow your bread on the hungry and satisfy the afflicted, then light shall rise for you in the darkness, and the gloom shall become for you like midday. Man, isn't that something? No? Hey, isn't that something? That is really something. That's something to behold. You know what that is? That's the gospel in a nutshell. If you were to jump forward and go to Matthew 25, we call it the judgment scene, where he separates the sheep and the goats. This is exactly what he's saying. When I was hungry, when I was sick, when I was in prison, you fed me, you responded to me, you acted as I would act. That's the gospel in a nutshell. And how beautifully it rose in with the gospel. You are the salt of the earth. What does it mean to be salt of the earth? You are the salt of the earth, but what if salt loses its taste? With what can it be seasoned? It can't be. It's good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And so we understand the gospel. We are salt. We are here to bring flavor, to bring seasoning, to bring life to each other. But sometimes we can become salty, right? No? You haven't noticed? You bet you. It's a reality of life. And then it is good no longer but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. But we are salt, attempting to bring the life of Christ into our world, into our experience, into our liturgy, our Eucharist, our church community, our families, to bring flavor, what it means to be alive in Christ Jesus. The gospel serves a twofold purpose. It is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. Very simple, but how profoundly true. We are all very comfortable with the aspect of the gospel that is comforting. I'm sure we all love parables like the Good Shepherd where we are really taken care of by him and where we are nurtured by him. The story of the prodigal son, the story of finding the treasure in the field, all of those myriad parables that he teaches, and we find great comfort in them, knowing I am the object of his love. It's when we come to the other side of the gospel that challenges and conflicts us about how we should let go of stuff, how I need to get out of my own self, my own comfortable space. That's when the gospel becomes contentious, when it pushes me and says, hey, in order to be a follower of Christ, you need to examine this. You can't keep living that way or in that mode or motif. Then the gospel really becomes contentious. Because it's hard when we are confronted and challenged and we are faced with those realities. I need to be changing. I need to be growing. It's not okay to just continue to be where I am. We are not physically, emotionally, where we were when we were 15 years of age. Hopefully we've grown and expanded. And to that extent that we have expanded our notions and understanding, hopefully we've expanded in relationship to the gospel as well. We've been together now for 876,000 hours. You and I, that is 10 years. 876,000 hours. Give or take a few, when I've been missing, but that's a lot of time. And during that time, the gospel has been very engaging and challenging for us. Some things have worked and other things have not. But we have most assuredly seen many blessings. I provided a brief summary for you last week, reflecting on 10 years of being here with you as pastor. And today I'd like to review with you some of the things related to the most recent part of our journey, particularly the past 2 years. Our building committee met on Friday to determine where we have landed with all of the work and all of the discussions and deliberations that we've had. And at the end of our meeting, one of our senior members said, this committee is now officially dissolved. He was right, because we've completed our work. And I'd like to speak clearly today about our experience and about my experience in working with them. And I say that because I don't say one thing to the staff and one thing to the building committee, and then I'm quoted as saying something else to somebody else. I want you to hear clearly my perspective. I want to sincerely thank the building committee for your exceedingly generous and kind response in terms of time and talent and service. We had some difficult and salty exchanges during the course of our journey. But to your credit, you all hung on in there and you continued to try and focus on what is important. You're some of the greatest people that I've worked with in my 44 and a half years as a committee. And thank you for your time and energy and your personal commitment to the process. You inspired me by your commitment and by your faithfulness to this. You showed up for meetings early in the morning at 8 o'clock quite often, and you showed up at noontime, and you showed up again in the evening time for various meetings. You met on your own while I was in Ireland, and you continued to be really reflective. And though your work was maligned by some people and some entities and some separate agendas, on a number of occasions, you were still faithful to the process. Thank you very much. You kept before you at every stage what was most important for our parish and where you felt the Lord was leading us. What a great gift. What a great gift. Thank you. And even as we met on Friday, there was a split decision among us A number of people wanted to continue moving forward and find other ways of completing the number that we had set as a goal and a target. And the other side was, hey, the information that you provided us. It was not our decision to make whether we build a new church or not. It was your decision. And you made it pretty clear that we do not need to move forward and proceed with plans to build a new church. For all the members of the building committee, there was a sadness in that reality, because from the outset there was never a question among us as to whether we had the potential to do this or not. We were aware of the fact that God has blessed us abundantly, and I reflected on some of that last week. We had that before us all of the time, the conviction that we've been blessed abundantly, spiritually, financially, emotionally. And so that was an important factor for us in moving forward. I can stand before you today and say to you, there was never any manipulation whatsoever of figures, facts, agenda, data. There was absolutely none. Nothing. Despite points of view to the contrary. And I can say and stand absolutely and completely on that. There was no hidden agenda. There was nothing hidden in terms of what we presented to you, the people, at all times. It appeared sometimes that we couldn't make up our minds, and you were right, because we couldn't in some particular pieces because of the grave matter of the facts involved. Last week, I gave you a quote from leadership in the church in a changing world. And the quote was, "It's not easy. You bet you it's not easy. It's very, very challenging." Today I'd like to give you a little different quote from that same piece. And the quote is, "Everybody carries 2 buckets. Everybody carries 2 buckets. Everybody carries around 2 buckets with them, a bucket of water and a bucket of gasoline. One fuels change, the other puts it out. Water fuels change because it douses the resistance. Gasoline puts an end to change because it fuels the fire of resistance." Anytime a person listens to a complaint and says, "I understand how you would feel that way," without redirecting them, pours gasoline on the situation and validates a complaint. It's a pretty important little detail. Because we are very prone to that reality, somebody presents a particular piece and they're hurt because it's not coming through, we have a kind of an affinity to move toward them and say, "Oh yeah, I understand," without giving them the most helpful direction and saying, "Let me help you look at that reality." It's a pretty important little detail. And it came home to me recently. Maybe only the second time in my life that I have had an incident similar to that. A good friend of mine came into my office and she said to me, the opening of the conversation was, "I haven't told this to any of my friends because I'm afraid they will judge my husband unfairly, and if they do, they will always hold that prejudice. Even if we get through the stuff, they will still have that prejudice." She said, "I love him and I want to work through this, and I don't want to be living later on with the prejudicial experience of my friends." And I said to her, "My God, where did you get such wisdom?" Most often when I encounter people in such circumstances, they've already worked the agenda over and massaged it pretty well with friends, and people have lined up and said, "I'm on your side, I agree with you. Get rid of him, dump him, do this, do whatever." how easily we fall into our own trap. For me, it was a profound moment and a profound experience. How did God give her such wisdom? When one gets to that point, that I just do not want sympathy from my particular perspective or from my hurt or my wound or my agenda, I really want to work my way through it. Then I'm not going to massage it with other people to just have support. The big question is, how am I going to manage this wound? What a beautiful piece in the first reading. When you do these things, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the sick, the imprisoned, and taking care of people, your wound will be healed. What a profound truth. The reason our wound is not healed is because we're not directing ourselves appropriately. And the wound continues. Teams travel at the speed of trust. Remember that. Teams travel at the speed of trust. It's a big question. So what is my wound? What is our wound? As a family, as a people?